Alrighty, so we are going to go ahead and just start with kind of a brief synopsis of what your book is about.
Well, a lot of people know about what came out in the news that got unloaded on me in 2018, 19, 20, and not so much in 2021. And of course, I've lived in the middle of this. And there was no way that the public could know the truth because the media blocked my words always out and ran their own story and sometimes made up quotes, sometimes took them out of context, and it looked like it was a viral cyber war that was unloaded on me, but the truth was it was orchestrated. And I know that it was, and this book, Walking Through the Fire, proves it. There is a 5-page fact-check document in the back of this book that's been out for 2 years, and no one has found a flaw in it yet. But the real story needed to be told. I had to write the book. I was compelled to do so. And I've said that if there were only 8 copies that were going to come off the printer, of course there are a lot more now, they would go to my 8 grandchildren because they deserve to know the truth about this, and instead of getting it from Wikipedia. So that's the big thing of it. But also it's a part of the narrative, the early part of my life. Not a lot of it, but enough to give you a flavor of how I came to the convictions that I've stood so strongly to defend, and what I believe in, and what I think reflects the values of Northwest Iowans in particular. So that's the basis of the book. And there's some things that are unique that no one has experienced. For example, there are only 4 people in all of the congressional history that have been removed from their committees by their own party. The other 3 are convicted felons. And what did I do? I defended Western civilization and was misquoted by the New York Times. And that's a stunning thing to think that Republican leadership could decide to tell all of Northwest Iowa, all of the 4th Congressional District, who would not represent you in the United States Congress. That is what they did. And once you see the top people in leadership and the moves that they made, they're all in this narrative, and they're fact-checked, and they're documented, and they're footnoted. Once you see all that, you'll have a better understanding about what happens in power politics at the highest levels.
Absolutely. Can you tell me a little bit more about what inspired you to write the book? What kind of problems you're addressing when you were in the process of writing it?
Well, I started a book putting the pieces together years ago, so I had a whole list of subject matters that I wanted to put in a book. Not many of them got in, but that was the beginning of it. And then I sat down about maybe 2 years ago, and I spent 4 days just streaming the narrative into an audio file, turned it into a transcript, and then started to edit that transcript because I can't begin to type as fast as I want to talk or think. And so that was the foundation of it. But to see that, I mean, I just believe this, that the voters, their decisions are sacrosanct. And when the voters make a decision and they elect somebody to represent them in Congress, and some leader, supposed leader from California decides you're not going to have that person representing you here in Iowa, people need to know that. And they need to see it unfold if they use this tactic again, so that there should be a local outrage when this happens. But it was a strategized piece of this. I was given a heads-up warning, and I think people need to know this, that within, say, 3 weeks of the primary election last year, that Kevin McCarthy, the current minority leader in the United States House of Representatives, was lobbying President Trump to endorse my opponent rather than this 18-year incumbent. And that tells you what they're willing to do at the top when you challenge their roles and hold them accountable. And I have defended the pillars of American exceptionalism, the most important issues to the country. I ran to the sound of the guns. And it was Andrew Breitbart, whom I do write about in this book. He's in the early stage of this. He was a good friend of mine. And he would say, walk towards the fire, walk towards the fire. Their bullets aren't real. And I did walk towards the fire and into the fire and out the other side, tempered by the experience. And this isn't a sad book that I don't want anybody to feel sorry for Steve King. I've got this wonderful life experiences behind me. Lord knows how much ahead of me. I'm surrounded by wonderful family and neighbors and friends, and out in the streets all across these counties in Northwest Iowa, I meet good people that come up and shake hands, and it feels really good, and especially good to wake up in my own bed in the morning for the first time in 25 years in a daily way, and see the sunrise from my east deck and the sunset from my west deck.
That's awesome. Can you tell me a little bit about the message that you're trying to convey in the overall story of the book? What do you want people to take away from it when they read through the whole thing?
Well, I want them to understand that I stood on these principles because I believe them. And that I've often said to people that we have the pillars of American exceptionalism. Most of them are in the Bill of Rights: freedom of speech, religion, press, assembly, the right to keep and bear arms, and you can go on. But then you add to that free enterprise capitalism and the foundations and values of I'll say Judeo-Christianity. That's what built this country, and that is the pillars of American exceptionalism. And every one of those pillars is something that I've run to the sound of the guns. I've walked into and through the fire to defend those values. And I see our nation being taken apart. And today it's more obvious than when I wrote this book. And so I hope people go to steveking.com and buy this book. And if they don't think they want to buy it, go to the website anyway. Take a look at it. And that it will bring about the education level all across the country. And when that happens, it adds to the dialogue, it informs people, and we'll be better and we'll be more active. I would add also that Iowa First in the Nation caucus, we don't give ourselves enough credit. And I've been deeply involved in that for at least the last 3 cycles where I had a significant voice. And we write this platform, and it gets to the state level, and we ratify the platform. And it's a solid conservative platform that's pro-family, pro-faith, pro-constitution, and those are the values that I've defended. But Iowans would come to the caucuses, and we'd have 17 presidential candidates the last round. And I would say to them, when you're there and when you cheer and applaud and stand up and stamp your feet, whatever he said to cause that to happen is likely to be a plank in that presidential candidate's platform. And as that goes, it shapes the platform for the candidates that we vote out of Iowa, send them to New Hampshire, down to South Carolina. And our platform that we shaped here made it into the Oval Office in the person of Donald Trump. And when I stood in the Oval Office and looked around with him that first time, I thought, my gosh, we accomplished what we set about doing. And I'm very, very happy, and I want to compliment the Iowans for being all part of that. But the folks in this book, some of them have been trying to take that away from us. Not just at the national level, but some at the state level have been willing to sacrifice and put at risk our First in the Nation caucus. And yet, if that were the case, and if it goes to either coast for that matter, or pick your place in America, if the heart of the heartland values aren't what's implanted in these candidates in the first contest in the nation, we're going to get left coast values or east coast values, and that would be a much different country. We're seeing that come out of the White House today, and we cannot sustain what's coming out of this administration.
Absolutely. And you stated that some of the issues that you were addressing in this book is way more obvious to the general public than what they used to be. Do you have any idea of kind of like why, or maybe just why you think that would be?
Well, I'm watching our culture be subdivided, and I would boil it down to this, that within the last, say, 20 to 25 years with the internet and cyberspace, whatever you wrote as maybe a youth and a child as an email or a text, it goes out and lives forever out there in cyberspace. And what we have for attitudes when we're growing up may not be the attitudes we have when we're 25, 35, 65 for that matter, but it's out there forever. And then as you tap in and you do your search, the algorithms decide, oh, you go for maybe it's home cooking, or maybe it's sports, maybe it's politics. If it is, you get divided. They identify the stories you read, and then they send you more and more stories. If it's to the right, more of those stories come that way. If it's to the left, they push. So it's dividing America against each other because of a political and religious ideology. And that division is pitting us against each other. And then the groups are being subdivided and pitted against each other on everything that you can imagine. In this book, I mentioned that there are 46 different sexual orientations that have been identified in this country. No person could memorize that or sort it out or appropriately deal with those differences. We have to come together. We have to understand what's true, look at the source, ask why they even published what they did, and get this thing back to the center again where we can see the objective truth and see what's good for the long-term future of this country. If we fail to do that, one day, maybe a generation from now, we'll look back at 1861 and understand what divided our country then.
For sure. And can you tell me a little bit about like what your writing style is in the book? How do you set the tone for this novel?
Well, I say I don't want anybody to feel sorry for me. I have got this great life full of life experiences, but I want it to be a book that was easy enough to read that people could understand it. But it also, when I studied history, they would bounce around on their chronological scale, and it drove me crazy. I'm trying to sort these dates out. Why did this happen? And so for me, it's always been a sequence along a timeline. So I start the book out early part of my life, and put some narratives and anecdotes in there, but bring it through in a chronological way so people can understand with clarity what happened next, what were the dynamics that brought these things about. And I've been through this now probably 15 times since I've been done with it, and it's still interesting to me actually, but what's stunning to me is the people that were at those highest levels. I look at what they did and the timing that they did it in, and it's still amazing to me that not one of them stood up. Everyone had my cell number. Not one of them called me and said, what about this quote? What about this quote? They want me to comment on it. They commented on it without checking with me. They would take a little piece, and then of course it's characterized by the press, and they would comment on that, and then that gets multiplied. And that pits people against each other too. And I think that they all had my cell number, and not one called me, and not one stood up and said, this is wrong. When they read this book, Walking Through the Fire, if anyone can make an allegation that I've mischaracterized anything in this book, I really want to hear it. I don't have a single critic, you know. No individual has ever stood up and said, I am the things, and they've experienced the things that have been put in this press or in Wikipedia about me. Not one. Justice Kavanaugh had multiple accusers, and Clarence Thomas had multiple accusers. I don't have one that stood at a microphone or looked me in the eye and said that I've ever disparaged them or disrespected them or treated in any kind of a racial way of any kind whatsoever. Not an individual out there, and you can bet they've been looking. So that's some of the unique things that are going on here, and we can't have a society that functions like this. I want people to be aware so they can fix it at every level. And I would ask people that they'll say, well, what can we do about this mess our country's in today, this division that's fracturing our country and burning our cities? And I'd say at every level, good people need to be involved, get their name on the ballot at every level, be on the school board, be in the school board meeting, look at the curriculum for your children, and bring the values that we hold dear that make the next generation better than the current generation, bring them forward and defend them in every walk of life so that we can bring this from the grassroots up and fix America. Because politics are downstream from the culture, and we have to fix the culture.
Absolutely. And so with your time in Congress, can you talk a little bit about how that has influenced what you put in the book?
Well, I've learned a lot. And to spend 6 years in the Iowa Senate and 18 years in the United States House of Representatives, and I had no idea I was going to have as much travel involved with this, but having gone to 70 foreign countries and met with the leaders in most of them, I've seen a lot, I've done a lot, I've been in and out of the war zones 9 to a dozen times. And so one thing is my understanding of history, having stood in many of those places and giving great reverence to the people that sacrificed so much. For example, the cemetery at Normandy. There are not quite 150 Jewish stars of David there, and the rest, 9,700 and some, are all Christian crosses, gave their lives for our God-given liberty and to protect and defend Western civilization, which Winston Churchill called Western Christendom. So just to stand in a spot like that, and I've stood in many others, and had great reverence for the sacrifices that went before us, and then in looking into the founding fathers, and I've long believed that, and believe to this day, and to my dying day, that God moved the founding fathers around like men on a chessboard to shape this country, and that the words in the Declaration of Independence could not have been replicated without his help, and that is the foundation for our Constitution. And so those pillars of exceptionalism must be protected and refurbished, and it's been shaped by the battles I've been in. And I've watched people that don't believe that, or most don't actually say that out loud, and maybe most of them don't believe that. But if we decide that our rights come from man instead of God, then government can take our rights away. And if we decide that it's not worth the fight now, there'll be another time, you have to get it right away. You have to jump on it the instant that it's there and be willing to take that challenge on. And when you have to lead, there's not time to go out and put your finger into the wind and see or do a poll. You have to do what your conscience and your instincts tell you to do, which is right, which is why I built a wall on the floor of the House of Representatives, why I called an all-day press conference to block the amnesty bill that had already had 68 votes in the U.S. Senate on, and successfully blocked it. Why I fought the fights I fought to kill Obamacare, and in the end didn't get it successfully accomplished. Piece after piece of this, defending marriage because the Constitution matters, and these were judicial activists that needed to be a legislative decision, and defending innocent unborn human life as the author of the National Heartbeat Bill that I took all the way to 174 co-sponsors. All those things happen because of conviction and instinct. And people that want to be leaders, you don't get the choice of going out there and being a follower first. You have to have the right set of values and have the conviction to go forward. And if you charge the hill and nobody goes with you, sometimes you get knocked down. And that has happened to me a few times as well.
Absolutely. How long did it take for you to write the book?
I suppose altogether in an active way, 2.5 years. But the intense part of it was more like maybe 2 to 3 months. And when I got to the place where I just had to get it done, then I would go out on my east deck about a half hour before sunrise, and I'd start to type. I'd bring my percolator out there and plug it in, and I'd type until my fingers and brain no longer were coordinated with each other. And then I'd go off and do some other things, but I marched through that. So it was about a 2.5 month intense time, and then to get it published was also a battle. Get it printed was not quite as hard, but it was still tough.
Absolutely, yeah. Writing a book is super tough. So tell me a little bit about like what comes next. What are maybe your plans for the future?
Well, we're going to see what happens to my political capital here when walking through the fire is. We're going to see how it sells, and I'm very interested in what people think once they read it, and how it penetrates into the knowledge base, especially the people that are politically active. But this matters to everybody to know this is our government. It's the government that lords over us, and we expect them to represent and reflect our values. And when they don't, whether we're ruled by something else, then we're disenfranchised. So we'll see what kind of traction that comes out of this, what happens to my political capital. But I hope and expect to be involved in helping some state house candidates. It's really important that we get the right people and keep the right people in the state legislature. The presidential caucus is already kind of starting up a little bit. We'll see how that unfolds and how I may have a voice in that. We'll have to see. And meanwhile, as long as this book is out, and as long as my grandchildren have a copy and get to read it and understand it, I can rest a bit. And it is I can't express what it meant to me when the printer unveiled that first copy to me out behind the warehouse in East Peoria, Illinois. But it was it struck me in a way I didn't expect, to finally get it where I can present it to people and ask them to read it, ask them to buy a copy of the book at steveking.com.
Absolutely, yeah. Anything that you would like to add or anything you think I forgot?
Well, you didn't forget anything, but I'd like to add something, and that is this, that I've represented Iowans for 24 years in public office, 6 years in the Iowa Senate, 18 years in the United States Congress. And this region that we have here, the 30-plus counties in the 4th Congressional District, the counties that went all the way down in the old 5th Congressional District. I've been to every single town in both of those congressional districts, 286 in the old 5th and 382 towns in the current 4th District. I've met people in most of those towns a couple times, more than a couple times, nobody was home. But I've been to all those towns. We are a wonderfully blessed region, and the foundation of all wealth, all new wealth, comes from the land. We have some of the richest land in the world. We've got the best producers and operators on it. We've got farms with families that kids are growing up out of there, and communities that are tied into that, and churches that are tied in, and businesses and entrepreneurs. And I deal with every level in the jobs that I've had, and I've gotten to meet people at every level. And I thank them all, because they have, for the most part, I could say almost everyone has enriched my life. And we need to know that this is the best place in the world to live and raise a family. And good people come out of here, and we are not only the heart of the heartland, but we're the core of American values. And if anybody's going to restore this country to those values, we're the ones that are going to do it.